So we're very happy to have Mark Blyth today with us. Hello, Mark.
Hello there.
This is everything you wanted to know but never had time to ask from the Press Project. And my first question will be, what is it that you think went wrong? What should we have done and what should we do now? And what have you done to contribute to this end during your visit here?
Right, well, let me take all of that in reverse order. The first thing that I haven't done was to make it worse, but I could have made it better had it not been for the fact that other people are involved who definitely made it worse. Those who made the choices did so under difficult circumstances, but those choices themselves weren't really choices that could have been other choices had they been made by other people in a different moment. But given that they happened at exactly that time, it's very important to realise that they were the choices that were made.
What would you have done differently?
I'd probably start that answer again by saying that I would have probably done exactly what other people would have done, only did it better with different outcomes.
How?
Right, let's take a concrete example. If you were in a television station, like The Press Project, and you were answering a question.
Oh, okay.
Well, I know, stretching it, you know. But if you were, hypothetically, in a hypothetical place that looks like a television studio,
okay,
with the blue cup, then I might be able to say something like, look, we all know that Greece is in trouble. It's been in trouble for a long time. It's been living beyond its means, and there was an adjustment that had to be made, and the adjustment that had to be made, and so for, you know, we had to make the adjustment. And therefore I would be reaching into the giant bag of economic cliches at my side and pulling them out just to generate a random selection of algorithmic economic cliches, which is known as the third memorandum.
Okay. So isn't that the problem, that we're basically lazy bastards?
Well, you know, the Brits would certainly put it that way. But I mean, the funny thing is, if you actually look at real statistics, including the ones that are made up by most international organizations, you'll find that the Greeks work on average 2,000 hours a year, and your average German works 1,360 hours. Now, you know, economists will tell you this is because they work with more capital and because they're more efficient. But actual fact is because they're tied up in bed with lederhosen and can't get up half the time, because once it constricts you in the night, it's very difficult to get out of that.
Okay. So, do you think it was a mistake for the Syriza administration to continue to be in power when they couldn't enforce their own policy?
Well, that presumes they had a policy in the first place. And it seems to me that the policy was actually, this is manifestly unjust, it isn't working, it's completely unreasonable. What kind of muppet would expect a bunch of decent people to continue down the road? We've been doing this for N number of years, let's stop and be reasonable. But then, of course, one was dealing with Brussels, so that was never actually going to work. After all, why should Belgium be the capital of reasonableness? So, upon realising that this was a failing strategy, a dead hand, as it were, how could I put it, not exactly the valiant thrust one would hope for in the great attack of democracy over tyranny, you could have folded and went home, but in fact they decided it's probably better for us to be the evil people doing this than someone who's genuinely evil, because things would even then get even worse than they already are. Please vote for me.
Okay, does that mean we'll have a better time if we are the ones who enforce these policies?
Well, you know, there's something about self-abuse that's better than nothing, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's better than getting someone else to do it.
Okay, so how was your experience with Tsakalotos? You spoke, what was it that? Was it an open conversation with the public? Was it open to the public?
Oh yes, it was very much open to the public.
How many were there?
I think there was about 6,000 in total. Most of them weren't actually in the room, but they were online. And that counts, I think. And no, it was a very good conversation, and unsurprisingly, we had a great deal to agree with, mainly because he really likes my first book and quoted from it extensively, thereby, you know, appealing to the vanity of an academic. I completely capitulated and was unable to ask any serious questions.
Okay. So it always works when people do that, when they compliment you on your book, or what a nice book you wrote.
Yes, that's it. It's like, oh my God, I loved your first book. It was amazing. I'm like, well, thanks very much. I was actually going to call you out for all the stuff you've done, but now I'm butter in your scalp, as they say in Scotland.
So that's the point where I say I really liked your book, and I really am planning to read it at some point. And
yes, well, I'm planning to read it, but is the bit where that becomes slightly less credible. It's the bit where you go, look, third chapter, footnote 47, when you call them out, amazing. Because even if that's not true, I wouldn't remember that, but it sounds like the type of clever thing I would do.
Okay. So you have no problem with people quoting your book.
No.
but unfortunately the opposite, but doing exactly the opposite from what your book says, or not?
Well, you know, I mean, my book says many things, as many books do. So there's always a way in which you can sort of like shape it to make sure that what I was saying was supportive. But you know, I'm generally supportive of the following points, and I think there was a convergence in our viewpoints on this, that in the best of all possible circumstances, if you take boilerplate, off-the-shelf neoliberal solutions to problems that don't really exist in imaginary economies and mathematical equations, and then stick them in a place like Greece that doesn't even have a functioning state, and you actually expect that to work, you might as well be tripping on acid.
Okay. Next question.
Yes.
You visit the Acropolis Museum.
I did indeed. I did.
Was that forced on you, or was it a voluntary? Was it consensual?
Well, no, I thought I was going for lunch. Somebody said Acropolis now, and I thought that was a restaurant.
Okay. Yes.
But no, I went to the Acropolis Museum, and like most things in Greece, it opened 5 years later than it was advertised, and essentially it sort of is a.
You're Scottish, aren't you?
Yes, it's a holding place for getting things back from the British Museum. Good luck with that, because if you actually got things back from the British Museum, there'd be nothing left in the British Museum. There is actually nothing British in the British Museum at all. It's all stolen.
Well, what do they call it that?
Well, they do actually call it what? Well, it's funny, because my wife used to live 20 years ago in London, and she lived across the road from the Imperial War Museum, which is a real museum in London, right? I mean, they actually have a place called the Imperial War Museum, and she's German, and she used to get up in the morning every day and just laugh at the fact that there's this thing across the road, this big ornate building down in Kennington called the Imperial War Museum, because in Germany, if you opened up a building and call it Der Imperialische Kriegsmuseum, right, there would be an outcry, there'd be national shaming, and of course the Brits are unabashedly not pro-war, I suppose, but well, pro-empire perhaps, I don't know. They want to keep this stuff anyway. And that summer we were there, they had this wonderful poster on the other side. It was called Spitfire Summer, you know, like, hey, chalks away, tally-ho, you know, all that kind of nonsense. And you know, this is so much of the British imaginary about themselves that, you know, the idea that they stole the marbles from you, you weren't using them. You didn't even have
the marbles, to be honest. There's nothing much you can do with them.
Well, I mean, you still don't have a state, but that, you know, I don't want to go too far down that road. But,
it's all right. It's all right.
That's
you
fine.
can have the marbles. I mean, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Well, we got confused because we play marbles as kids, and they're like little round glass things. So we were to bring in the Elgin marbles. I thought these were actually sort of like, you know, marbles about this size.
Were you disappointed then at that point?
Yeah, well, you know, Elgin's a town in the very north of Scotland. It's next door to a big radioactive nuclear power plant thing.
So you're familiar with the issue?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm deeply into the archaeological, historiography.
Was it that boring then?
No, it was absolutely fascinating. Primarily because it was great to watch all of the tour guides going around pretending they knew stuff that nobody actually knew.
Okay.
You know, so you're standing there and you're standing beside one of these statues, which of course there's a gap next to it where there's the other ones in the British Museum. And then there's this German guy banging on about sort of like der Gürtel hängt over, so talking about how the statue's dressed and the way that they would put the belt on and all this sort of stuff, which is obviously complete nonsense and is made up. So that was actually more fun than anything else.
Okay. Can I get you to do a Russian accent as well? There was a Russian guide there as well.
Of course there was the Russian guide. The Russian guide was there, very good guide. Point out that, you know, in Russia we have many trousers like this, and all of them are bigger. Best one, of course, is Lenin in sarcophagus. He is 200 feet long, but you see him through reverse glass, so he looks normal.
Okay. That's Mark Blyth, the Russian economist, who's here.
At least no.
And okay, let's go back to economics.
Go on.
You might have something to say about this. What should we do now?
First of all, who is we?
Okay, the Greek people, the Greek government.
Right.
You can answer in two parts.
All right. Let's be serious for a moment. What should we do now? Well, let's think. You're under the third memorandum, and if you don't do it, this really annoying guy called Dieselblum goes to the bank and turns off the pipes for your money, which is what happened last year. You don't want that to happen again. The most remarkable thing is that despite signing the third memorandum and cutting even more and having lost 30% of GDP, the economy is actually still alive. Right, that's actually the most amazing, in all seriousness, that's the most amazing thing. And, you know, hopefully from this point on, it can only get better. And I say this in a guarded but serious way. Greece, as we know, was a conduit for a bank bailout that politicians in Europe couldn't own. right? So according to the latest estimates, which may be overestimates, I've recently heard 95% of the cash that was given to Greece went right through Greece and went right back to creditors. And when you obscure all this by talking about creditors, whatever, you're talking about highly levered European banks that collectively were too big to bail as a system. They bailed them out in 2008, 2009, and then 2010, the sovereign debt crisis basically means that if you're running a bank like, let's say, Deutsche Bank, 86% of German GDP is your asset footprint, you've got a 2% asset cushion relative to all the stuff you got out there in the world. If Greece loses value, you dump your Greek assets, you dump your Portuguese assets, your bank is insolvent, and that causes massive damage to Germany. So the whole point was to basically use these countries as a way of bailing these banks without ever admitting it to the public. So if you think the first memorandum was essentially really bail the banks, the second one was bail them again a bit more and then take it from the private sector and dump it in the public sector. We invented the ESM and various things to do this. And then the third one is, we thought it was getting better, but it's still not fixed. So let's chuck some money at it and finally cauterize it. So Greece is in the cautery stage. And you get out of hopefully you get out of the emergency ward, and hopefully it starts to grow. Some sensible debt relief, real debt relief. Not we promised to do something in 2018 would be good, but as it stands, it's remarkable you're still alive.
Okay, what are the chances for a debt relief in your view?
Well, here's the problem. Once you've said we are not in a transfer union, it is not going to happen, and then you do bilateral swaps with Germany, and they have all these credits at the finance ministry, which are Greek credits, which are marked at 100 cents to the euro, and you owe us this money, and you will pay it back. When it's manifestly obvious that that's never going to happen, they have to book losses. So take a lesson from finance. Banks do not like booking losses. Banks take non-performing loans and take years and years to work them out, and they would really like to do the same thing with you guys. So while there can be extensions of maturity, drop the interest rate, all that sort of stuff, the idea that there'll be formal forgiveness, which would be confidence enhancing, which would get rid of a great deal of uncertainty, which would stabilize the politics and would be eminently sensible, means that someone on the creditor side has to book loss, both economically and politically. Economically, it doesn't matter, it's already dead capital. But politically it matters a great deal, and that's why it's difficult to get it done.
Okay. You spoke for a long time without using any of your famous metaphors. Would you like to elaborate on the Katy Perry?
The Katy Perry problem is pretty much what Greece was facing in 2015. So you guys wanted to stay in the euro and have an end to austerity, and I wanted to be in a relationship with Katy Perry and stay married to my wife. And I floated that one past her and was told, no, you can't have both. And I thought, that seems to be a bit like Greece.
Okay. Was that the only problem you faced when it came to dating Katy Perry?
Well, there were a few other problems. Russell Brand. I mean, I managed to get him out of the way, thankfully. Okay. But we just haven't managed to hook up. I'm not in LA that often, and frankly,
I know.
I'm moving on. I mean, now Johnny Depp's getting divorced. Amber's calling me all the time. It's just enough. I know. I mean, let's try to switch the phone off for this interview. It's like she's at it all the time.
I know.
It gets ugly.
Okay. This was Mark Blyth, and thank you very much for being here.
No, it's absolutely been your pleasure. The forces of the blue cup will triumph. The green cup will be vanquished. Never will the tyranny of the green cup haunt this table again.